In a world where power determines everything, Fate is a young man despised by society. He possesses a cursed skill called Berserk. This ability only knows how to satisfy its endless hunger by absorbing the power of enemies. But when the darkness hidden deep within this skill begins to awaken, Fate's destiny takes an unexpected turn. From a weak, lowly nobody, he gradually transforms into a warrior. With each step on his bloody journey, Fate must face the temptation from the destructive power within. Will the protagonist control this instinct, or become a slave to the thirst for power? The situation grows increasingly chaotic and dangerous, with goblins running rampant everywhere, causing terror among the inhabitants of this land. However, the appearance of a powerful special squad quickly eliminates this threat. With superior strength and excellent combat skills, they easily exterminate the goblins in no time. After the battle, the group of warriors returns to town to celebrate their resounding achievement. Fate can only stand from afar, looking at them with immense admiration. For him, killing even one goblin seems unimaginable. With an empty stomach and skills at the lowest level, Fate accepts menial jobs despite knowing he's at the bottom of society. The three Bervalik brothers are notorious for their cruelty and cunning. Rafen uses his fame as a holy knight not only to oppress commoners but also to treat Fate with utter contempt. He doesn't hesitate to throw measly wages on the ground, forcing Fate to bend down to pick them up. The Bervaliks frequently beat and mock the unlucky skill that he possesses. This humiliation isn't easy to bear, but to earn food and survive each day, Fate must endure. A female knight named Rossi suddenly appears. Having witnessed this terrible scene, she immediately intervenes to protect the young man. Rossi protests against the brothers' actions, demanding they stop hiring Fate for gate-guarding duties that rightfully belong to holy knights. If they continue behaving this way, Fate should report it to her immediately. Afterward, he hands over his shift to Rossi and heads to a restaurant. Though she has good intentions to help him, Rafen's character isn't simple, and it's impossible to predict what underhanded methods he might use. The restaurant owner warns Fate that if he continues to endure, the outcome will be disastrous. No one wants to possess a berserk devourer skill and become useless. He doesn't dream of becoming a knight. Being a warrior, merchant, or artisan would be enough. While feeling dejected, Fate discovers thieves sneaking into the city and immediately reports to Rossi. She hands over the guard duty and goes to eliminate them herself. Unexpectedly, a corrupt knight tries to escape in Fate's direction. If he lets him escape, Rossi will face trouble. Despite being weak and inexperienced, Fate must confront him. This encounter throws him into his first battle. When the protagonist finds himself in a desperate situation under attack, the berserk skill suddenly activates and eliminates the enemy. He absorbs all the strength and abilities of his opponent, adding appraisal and mind-reading skills. This makes Fate realize he isn't useless after all. Berserk turns out to be a terrifying ability. Soon after, Rossi rushes over in panic. Fate can read her thoughts and knows she's very worried about him. To repay him, Rossi introduces a new job for him at her own hurt household. If he stays here, Fate will be beaten and tormented by the Bervaliks forever. The protagonist stands at a crossroads, continue staying where he's exploited to the extreme, or seize the opportunity to work with Rossi, which promises a brighter future. Fate decides to accept her offer and goes to work for the hurt family. After defeating the thief, Fate feels a new power in his body. He's confident that with his current abilities, he can defeat monsters. The next day, he visits a weapon shop. However, with only 2 silver coins, he can only afford old items from the trash bin. He's attracted to a strange black sword. When he touches it, a mysterious voice echoes in his mind. Rudis is a living entity containing a soul, carrying within it will and unlimited desire. Meanwhile, Memon is bitter because Rossi interfered with the gate-guarding business of the Bervalik family. Rafen remains calm because useless people like Fate are everywhere. Besides, both Hurt and Bervalik are among the 5 families protecting the kingdom, so there's no problem. The important thing now is to focus on successful research to achieve an immortal body. Back to the protagonist, the sword greed suddenly warns him about an enemy's appearance. With his current strength, Fate easily eliminates a goblin, thereby rapidly increasing his stats and adding the power enhancement skill. Right after, hundreds of other goblins appear and attack in waves. Fate continues using greed to destroy the monsters, striking with perfect accuracy and quickly turning the battlefield into a mass grave. His strength increases significantly, and most surprisingly, his hunger is satisfied. Fate had thought innate traits couldn't be changed. According to Greed, after each enemy elimination, he will receive experience points and level up. However, Berserk only steals skills and stats, meaning he can't receive experience points. That's why Fate remains at level 1. He must absolutely not reveal to anyone that he possesses the Berserk skill, because it's a skill that violates divine ethics. The sword has acknowledged Fate as its minion and will accompany him on his fighting path from now on. After collecting goblin ears, Fate receives a reward. He plans to eat a hearty meat meal, but greed wants to renovate its appearance. Meanwhile, Fate accidentally bumps into a brutal man and reads the desperate pleas for help in a child's mind. Although he can't see the man's skills, Fate is determined to rescue the child. Lord Laplace is the creator of the world. Before leaving, he bestowed special powers upon humanity. The boy feels sad that he possesses such a useless skill. The nun has done her best to comfort him. When Lord Laplace still protected humans, there were no skills or stats, and even monsters didn't exist. The boy wishes he could live in such a world. Everyone has been searching everywhere but can't find Sahara. The girl is currently being cruelly tortured by the man. But fortunately, Fate has arrived. The soul of greed signals that the man is underestimating him, so he should take advantage of this. Fate quickly takes the girl to safety, then confronts the man. With just one slash, he falls to the ground. Fate uses his sword to probe the man, who in unbearable pain finally reveals that the person behind it is Kyla. Fate takes the little girl to town for grilled meat skewers. Sahara can't contain her emotions and bursts into tears, seeing which Fate gives her his portion as well. In the evening, he takes the girl back to the parish. Being thanked for the first time, he's somewhat surprised. Both Fate and Sahara have weak, useless skills. The protagonist advises the girl that no matter how difficult things get, she must smile because happiness will surely come. His father used to tell him the same thing, which is why Fate wanted to save Sahara. A new skill technique is added, allowing him to use special attacks twice in succession. Only now does the protagonist realize that the man earlier had used a very dangerous skill that could cut enemies into 3 pieces. Had he known, Fate wouldn't have rushed into battle with him. With its conservative and contemptuous character, the soul of greed believes Fate just got lucky, which motivates him to become even stronger. After a busy day, he forgets that tomorrow is his first day working for the Hart family. He still hasn't bought any new clothes to replace the tattered ones he's wearing. There's news that Lord Mason, Rossi's father, was killed on the battlefield. Now Rossi will become the clan leader and directly restrain the 3 Bervalik brothers. The next morning, Fate arrives to start his new job, facing an immensely spacious mansion. Rossi appears looking so beautiful that the protagonist is dazzled and overwhelmed. She leads him to her father's grave. Galia is a continent ruled by monsters, and the Holy Knights are tasked with eliminating them. This year it's the Hart family's turn, but her father was unfortunately killed by the celestial dragon. That monster has appeared after hiding for thousands of years. Fate realizes that Rossi is truly strong and kind-hearted. While grieving the loss of her beloved father, she still worries about him. From now on, Rossi will become the clan leader, and she very much wants to make the Hart household livelier with Fate. But he must absolutely not touch her hand, as it would activate mind reading. Just then, Haru appears. She's the head maid of this family. Perhaps Haru doesn't like him much. Even on their first meeting, Fate is afraid of those killer eyes. The protagonist is treated to a hearty meat feast, and with a full stomach, he begins working. Here, he meets Mr. Minova and Oliver. At first, seeing Fate talking to his sword, Mr. Minova thinks the protagonist is a freak, and his emotional reaction to eating meat makes everyone laugh. But soon his stomach is growling again. At this rate, food costs will exceed his wages. Afterward, Haru leads him to meet Rossi. Due to possessing the Berserk Devourer skill, his hunger becomes increasingly terrible, and Fate can no longer control himself and faints. When he wakes up, he finds a letter from Rossi allowing him a day off. Right now, the protagonist is very curious about why his body has become like this. The soul of greed explains that the Berserk skill has tasted souls. Therefore, from now on, the protagonist must take on the task of finding and killing monsters as if looking for food. Fate understands that if he can't control Berserk, he might become an irrational person, obsessed with hunger and possibly attacking anyone. When reaching the threshold of endurance, his eyes will turn red. Immediately afterward, he goes outside and unconsciously smells delicious scents everywhere. This is because hunger enhancement has been activated, a temporary power that helps Berserk consume souls effectively, while also increasing night vision and paralyzing weaker enemies. As a result, the goblins just stand still in one place, allowing him to slaughter them freely. However, this is still not enough. Fate follows greed's advice and enters the deep forest to continue hunting goblins. With his current strength, he can quickly eliminate these monsters. Finally, his hunger is satisfied. Right after, a goblin king appears. Thanks to the self-healing skill, the protagonist's physical stats are restored. Encountering such a large and powerful monster for the first time, Fate is somewhat hesitant, fearing he might become its meal. Greed encourages and guides the protagonist to face it head-on. The first successful beheading strike is a good start, but it's 1 step forward and 10 steps back. At this rate, how can he win? Greed boosts his fighting spirit, and the protagonist ferociously charges forward to successfully eliminate the monster, significantly increasing his stats. Following Greed's advice, he dedicates all his stats to the sword, and a new form appears, the demon bow. Just then, a monster that was eavesdropping appears, and Fate shoots randomly but still hits the target. Afterward, he brings the Goblin King's ears to where Sahara is staying. Now everyone can have a hearty meal. Meanwhile, during his guard duty, Fate discovers a strange girl. Surprisingly, it's Rossi. She's dressed this way to survey the town, and this matter shouldn't be disclosed to anyone. The protagonist is about to return to continue his work when his boss pulls him back, wanting him to be her escort. Rossi's inspection officially begins. To conceal her identity, Rossi will change her name to Roki. Hearing Greed mock her, Fate scolds it for being disruptive. Rossi freezes, thinking he's scolding her, but she doesn't mind. She's actually excited to go with Fate. Both blush in embarrassment as the contemptuous voice of Greed's soul echoes again. Fate is about to deal with it when Rossi stops him. This is also the first time she sees this sword. It seems very strange that someone with an unlucky skill like him would have a weapon. However, no one knows that Berserk is truly dangerous. Once it has tasted souls, it cannot stop, consuming more and more to significantly increase power. Otherwise, he will starve to death and turn into a monster. Because it's too frightening, the protagonist cannot reveal it to anyone. Afterward, they go down to the town together to carry out their mission. The scenery here is bustling, and Rossi is attracted by juicy grapes. The owner lets them taste some, and Rossi proudly mentions that the grapes grown at her home look quite delicious. Almost revealing her identity, Fate follows Greed's advice and says that her relatives work for the Hart family. Rossi thanks him profusely, though she finds it a bit odd that the protagonist is constantly talking to himself. The 3 Bervelik brothers begin causing trouble again, and upon seeing Fate, they belittle and insult him. Rossi can't stand it and immediately speaks up. In this world, commoners opposing knights is a capital offense. Looking carefully, he sees a strong resemblance to Rossi. The soul of Greed urges the protagonist to pretend to be her lover. He panics and blurts it out. Rossi takes the initiative to caress Fate and then mentions she's heading home to cook for her beloved husband. Everyone stops doubting because knights never do household chores. Walking arm in arm with a man for the first time makes Rossi very nervous. Fate apologizes awkwardly for touching her, but Rossi actually likes it. This escort duty is becoming quite stressful. Rossi has been attracted to sparkly jewelry. Fate has used his appraisal skill to find precious stones inside raw ore. If the seller knew about this, he'd be furious. Seeing Rossi enjoying these items, the protagonist feels she doesn't resemble a holy knight at all. However, Rossi decides not to buy anything because she finds it unnecessary. She asks Fate if he knows any warriors. Besides Oliver and Minova, they accidentally overhear rumors about goblins being massacred. People believe a wild animal is responsible, but they're not certain. There's also news about the nuns looking for someone to thank for donating the Goblin King's ear. Feeling curious, Rossi goes to ask for details, but no one knows anything. Rossi immediately asks the protagonist to take her to where the warriors are. It turns out she decided to become a commoner and inspect the town because of this rumor. Things are getting interesting. Fate leads her to a familiar tavern and introduces her to the owner as Roki, a new colleague from his new workplace. Having not seen him for a while and now bringing a girlfriend to meet him, Fate is mortified, and Rossi breaks her cup. However, the owner doesn't mind because warriors not controlling their strength is normal. The soul of Greed knows for sure that Rossi has feelings for the protagonist. Embarrassed, he breaks his cup too. After eliminating goblins, warriors collect their ears to earn money. However, the corpses remain intact, so they suspect some monster has wandered here. This would prevent merchants from other areas from coming to town. Fate feels extremely guilty. At this moment, Old Man Adu appears and guesses it might be a bear. The Holy Knights will directly go hunting, and with his current stats, Fate cannot possibly withstand them. It's even more tense when Rossi sees him in such a state. Right after, nomadic warriors also come to the restaurant. Seeing such a beautiful girl, they come over to flirt. Before Fate can act, she launches an attack that sends the man flying. Her true identity is revealed, and they offer a bag of money to beg for mercy. Rossi is not only talented and beautiful, but also merciful. She's willing to overlook what just happened. Rossi wants to fulfill her father's wish to create a world where everyone can laugh together. Fate will wait for that day and follow the girl he secretly loves. Thanks to Rossi, the protagonist's sword gets maintained. She does this to thank Fate for helping her learn more about the monster. The Bervelik household has information about the hunting expedition, but is determined not to let Rossi know. Suddenly, he hears familiar voices. It's the 3 brothers again, intimidating a lost child. Following Rossi's instructions, the protagonist rescues the boy. Incidentally, he directly asks Rafen why he isn't informing her about the monster. He uses the excuse that her father just passed away, so he wants Rossi to rest for a while. Before leaving, the heart guy utterly despises Fate, and afterward, the two lead the child to find his mother and eat grilled meat skewers. At this moment, Fate recalls that 5 years ago, he too was lost and met a very kind holy knight. Finally, the child finds his mother. In the fading afternoon sunlight, Rossi's beauty doubles, leaving Fate completely dazed. Afterward, they return home only to be severely scolded by the head housekeeper. Their faces show guilt, but deep down, they wish every day could be spent together like this. To prevent Rossi from discovering him during battle, the soul of greed advises him to use dark magic to suppress awareness. Fate doesn't forget to buy Rossi an iron ore as a gift. The protagonist makes the excuse that he wants to thank Rossi for creating a new job for him and meeting colleagues who feel like family. Using his appraisal skill, Fate has managed to buy a genuine gemstone, making Rossi very happy. The following evening, while Fate was hunting, he accidentally encountered warriors going on an expedition. They thought it was the Likmukuro, so they ran away as fast as they could. The protagonist wanted to continue hunting goblins to increase his stats before the knights began their hunt. The next morning, he worked with a sleepy face. His mistress assigned him another secret mission. Rossi led Fate to the Hart family's vineyard, where he met Rossi's mother. She directly asked Fate if he liked her daughter, making both of them very embarrassed, but she meant it in terms of master and servant. Fate didn't hesitate to praise her profusely. Confidently speaking to his potential mother-in-law, he wanted to dedicate his entire life to her. Rossi shyly blushed and ran up to her room. Whenever she faces an awkward situation, she reacts this way. As a child, seeing even a tiny bug would make her scream and cry loudly. Who would have thought she'd grow up to be a knight and become the head of the Hart family? Fate firmly believes she can fulfill her duty to protect commoners. Currently, Rossi misses her father tremendously and is determined to fulfill his wishes. Fate joined everyone in harvesting crops. An uncle let him taste the exquisite grape juice. He had thought Rossi was deeply grieving her father's passing, but was surprised to find her back here helping everyone. She returns once a year at precisely this time, not only to harvest crops, but also to eliminate the goblins in that valley. Just hearing about it made the protagonist's stomach rumble. It seems Berserk wants to consume souls stronger than goblins. On the way back, he met someone who didn't appear to be from this country. She also had identical red eyes and said she would let the protagonist eliminate the Kobans, then arrange to meet again. Fate found it very confusing. Even Greed didn't know who she was. Just then, Rossi was also returning home. She guessed the girl was from Galia. 4,000 years ago, that country was attacked by monsters who killed villagers. It seemed she might be one of the survivors. Rossi had never met a pure-blooded Galian like that. Fate felt worried about Rossi going on the hunt alone. However, Rossi has warriors by her side, and moreover, she's a knight with very high strength stats. The next day, the two of them, along with warriors, went to the valley to eliminate Kobans. Suddenly, a leader appeared. They had never seen a Koban so large and ferocious. Seeing the delicious prey before him, Fate entered a semi-devourer state. If Rossi saw him like this, his life would be over. The soul of greed believed the monster possessed level 50 strength. It had accumulated resentment for many years, making it very dangerous. Eliminating it wouldn't be easy. As a knight, Rossi promised to complete the mission of destroying monsters to protect commoners. Fate was somewhat apprehensive because he wasn't skilled enough to face it. However, he couldn't ignore it. The Hart territory would be destroyed, and the girl he liked could be killed. The protagonist decided to fight alongside Greed until the end. That night, he single-handedly eliminated the Kobans, killing them one by one with arrows. However, these souls still couldn't satisfy Berserk. At all costs, the protagonist had to defeat the final boss. With the Devourer skill activated, Fate used his demon bow, aiming directly at the target. Surprisingly, it could catch arrows with its hands, so the only option was to approach and slash it. This Koban possessed the Force Strike skill. One hit would shatter internal organs. Fate was unfortunately struck on the arm and thrown back unconscious, just pretending for dramatic effect, because the main character can't die so early. Fate quickly rushed forward to slash it once, then gathered all of Greed's power to attack toward the monster. Victory and defeat were clearly distinguished. Suddenly, the protagonist's body became intensely excited. This was the reaction to consuming such a delicious soul for the first time. Fate struggled to control himself to prevent something terrible from happening. The next morning, Rossi and the warriors returned to the valley. They saw the remains from the previous night and believed someone had used magic to eliminate them. Rossi brought this news to the dining table. The protagonist sat trembling, afraid of being discovered. But fortunately, Rossi was shifting her suspicions to the Galian girl they met yesterday. The fighting strength of people from that country surpasses even holy knights. Anyway, the monsters were gone, and she was very happy that the land was safe. Seeing her daughter's bright expression, her mother asked Fate to stay by Rossi's side and support her. He felt somewhat inferior, believing himself unworthy, but she thought the heart was what mattered most. Rossi's mother was also a commoner, yet she had supported her husband Mason very well. Now seriously ill and not knowing when she might pass away, she hoped he could fulfill her wish. This made Fate feel very uncomfortable because he was deceiving Rossi. That night, Fate again went with greed to find soul food. However, his current hunger could no longer be satisfied with goblins, forcing him to return and find stronger monsters. Thinking about Rossi's mother's words, he felt he had no right to be by her side. While deep in thought, he heard shocking news. Hart would organize an expedition to hunt Mukuro in Galia, and of course, the Holy Knight Rossi would participate. Fate tried to stop her but failed. He felt very worried because this was a life or death game. Once there, they might not return. Moreover, the Hart family was a thorn in the eyes of the three Bervalik brothers, and they might be plotting something. That evening, he decided to confront them to spite them. With his current strength and force skills, Fate had become a formidable warrior, making battles easier than ever. Right at the start, the henchmen quickly fled, leaving Herain alone. Fate was confident he could deal with him without difficulty. Before beginning the battle, the protagonist decided to remove his mask to reveal Mukuro's true identity. A character many had heard rumors about, but no one knew the truth. The soul of Greed meticulously analyzed Herain's skills and weapons. With extreme confidence, Greed affirmed that defeating the opponent would be extremely easy. Herain's sword couldn't withstand Fate's strength and was cut in half in just seconds. Next, he performed knee strikes and kicks, leaving him battered. Each of the protagonist's blows was not only revenge for Rossi, but also liberation from the years of suffering, oppression, and hatred he had endured. Before finishing him off, Fate forced him to reveal what Rossi would do next. Despite Herain's desperate pleas, he didn't waver. Determination and rage caused Fate to unleash all his attack skills. Finally, Fate delivered a fatal sword strike, ending Herain's life. The one who once humiliated him had now received deserved revenge. Fate had acquired his skills and had become a holy knight. However, no one would acknowledge it because he had killed Herain to achieve it, and just thinking about having his abilities within himself made him want to vomit. Greed had enough stats to transform into its second form, a sharp scythe that could cut through any obstacle. What he desired most now was to prevent Rossi's journey to Galia. Rossi had prepared to carry out the hunting mission for 3 years. Before leaving, she left a letter of recommendation for Fate. Although a brave knight, she was still a girl and couldn't face the dangers in Galia alone. Concerned about her safety, Fate decided to request leave to support Rossi on this dangerous journey. Everyone supported this decision. Housekeeper Haru gave him some money to get by. The next day, Fate set off for Galia, carrying hope with his determination. Meanwhile, Rossi stood before all the warriors, vowing to inherit her father Mason's mission to eliminate the celestial dragon and bring peace to the village. During her journey, she met Milia and Mugen. Although there was obvious dislike between them, both agreed with the common goal of supporting Rossi. In this battle, she was confident that Miria and Mugen would become effective assistants in the upcoming mission. After examining the collected samples, Ren suspected someone had used the magic of the sinful weapon, the Dark Sword, to eliminate monsters. Back to Fate, he had arrived at a familiar land, his birthplace. Fate had asked to go by horse carriage, but the uncle refused because monsters would run rampant at night, making it very dangerous. Holding the money Haru gave him, he decided to find a hearty meal despite Greed's objections, who wanted to renovate the sword. In a restaurant, Fate accidentally witnessed a group of people bullying a young man. He didn't hesitate to intervene, causing the thugs to fear and beg for forgiveness. Sito was an old acquaintance of Fate. Their relationship wasn't very close. He was the son of the village chief who had severely bullied Fate. Back then, Fate's father possessed the skill to eliminate monsters, and Fate was very adept at grinding medicine for his father and sister. After his father passed away, he was driven out by the village chief for being useless and incompetent. Until now, the protagonist still couldn't forget the painful memories from his childhood. Surprisingly, the one who once oppressed him was now kneeling and desperately begging for his help to eliminate monsters. Anyway, wanting to satisfy Berserk's hunger, he accepted. Seeing Fate, the village chief cursed him as useless trash, saying bringing him back to the village wouldn't accomplish anything. He intended to sacrifice him to the monsters in exchange for peace. Sito couldn't let that happen because Fate now possessed limitless power that even several warriors could never attain. Sito's wife had been killed by monsters, leaving him as a single father raising his child. His current life wasn't as comfortable as before. When Fate saw Sito with his daughter, He couldn't help but remember his own father. A month ago, monsters had come to this land, destroying the village. They could fly, so no one here could eliminate them. Knowing Fate was hungry, Sito went to prepare a simple meal for him. The soul of greed guessed the monsters were Gabai. They were very intelligent and extremely dangerous. Greed warned that they would use one as bait, and after observing the opponent's strength, they would bring out the entire herd to attack at once. There would be no escape, no matter how fast one ran. It sounded a bit scary, but Fate was determined to act as promised. The child, seeing him talking to himself, found it very strange and then gave him a candy, which was timely to fight hunger. He suddenly felt tired and fainted. The child revealed that the candy Fate had eaten was given by her grandfather. Sito immediately knew this was his father's ploy to take Fate as a sacrifice for the monsters. Just then, monsters appeared and attacked the village. The night scenery was tinted with the red of fire. Villagers panicked and fled. Houses were burned, while Fate remained unconscious due to the sleeping drug. Things became tenser than ever. Finally, Sito finished making the antidote and gave it to Fate. Immediately after waking up, he took his sword to eliminate the rampaging monsters outside. Greed read the monsters' skills. They would attack from above and use magic bullets. Fate decided to use the scythe to slash but failed. They switched to wide area attacks, concentrating magic in one place and throwing it directly at the enemy. At this point, the protagonist had to unleash his strongest skill, eliminating them one by one. Fate acquired a new skill, Magic Bullet. Now only the final boss remained. Before it could attack, it was struck by a fatal blow from the protagonist. Finally, only a mass grave remained. Sito realized Fate's strength exceeded even special warriors. Moreover, with the appraisal skill, he could earn a living. At this point, the protagonist had no choice but to follow the path of fighting. Sito would go down to town to find work, also for the sake of his little daughter. He wanted Fate to slap him to prove his determination. Without restraint, he punched him, almost dislocating his jaw. From hatred, they had now become friends. Afterward, Fate visited his father's grave. Rossi's team was about to reach the land of Lanchester. Morgan warned to be careful with the Lord. The reason would become clear upon meeting. Fate was also on his way there. He had accepted an escort job for 3 silver coins, conveniently going to where Rossi was. Suddenly, the horse carriage was stopped by a gang of highway robbers. Seeing the injustice, Fate got out of the carriage, intending to teach them a lesson about manners. Unexpectedly, the cowardly driver held him tightly. How could he fight like this? The ruffians were about to charge, but were beautifully dealt with by the girl from yesterday. In gratitude, the uncle let her ride along, but as soon as she climbed in, she overwhelmed the carriage. Fortunately, the girl had the ability to change the weight of weapons. Both possessed deadly sin skills. Actually, Greed knew everything but had hidden it from Fate. The girl's name was Mai, possessing the Wrath skill. Hearing her stomach growl, Fate gave Mai some dried meat. Watching her eat made him feel sorry. Finally, they arrived in Lanchester. In the city, a girl was being threatened on the street when suddenly a young man appeared, eliminating them and looking extremely cool. This was Rudolph, the Lord of Lanchester. Though handsome, his character wasn't great, always showing off excessively. Today, he came down to the street to prepare to welcome the Galia expedition. Hearing this, Fate realized he had arrived before Rossi. At this moment, Mai suddenly fell asleep, and Fate had to carry her while looking for an inn. Through the greetings of the local people, surprisingly, in this territory, everyone always prioritized holy nights. Fate discovered something strange. They were marked with different symbols. Perhaps here, the Lord had clearly divided classes. Rudolph was very cruel, ready to attack anyone who failed to complete a mission. Deep down, he never wanted Lanchester to be inferior to the Hart family. Once Mai fell asleep, no one could wake her. Accompanying the little girl was Sloop, a deadly sin weapon like greed, gluttony, wrath, greed, sloth, lust, envy, and pride. These were skills that violated divine ethics, hence called deadly sins, among which Fate's gluttony skill was the most severe. The protagonist was previously always considered useless and incompetent. Then one day possessed power but had to kill lives to continue existing. Fate always maintained his spirit to resist berserk. If his mind weakened, it would devour him. To gain power, he had to maintain a semi-devourer state. That night, he continued to eliminate monsters, this time a Sanderman. Fate would use the magic bullet skill, chanting to integrate power into the bullet and then aim at the target. Later, many other Sandermen appeared one after another. Fate tried to restrain himself, not to be strongly provoked. Meanwhile, Mai had woken up with an empty stomach. The girl accidentally heard that there existed a monster called the Hunter Golem, very powerful, that even Lord Rudolph couldn't eliminate. Fate had defeated the monsters. That was just the appetizer. The main course had also appeared. Facing the giant Hunter Golem made warriors scared. Fate was confident he could eliminate it alone. not to show off or for justice, but to fill his hunger. The solo battle was intense. The monster used magic sand dust to suck in opponents and then used rocks to crush them. Fate didn't submit, using his ultimate scythe skill for the first strike. But the Sanderman King played dirty, escaping underground. Unable to let it escape, Fate exchanged 20% of his stats with greed. The Bloody Taman magic, with a fire bonus, shot straight at the monster, shattering its body. Fate absorbed the magic sand dust skill from it. The brilliant success made other warriors admire his strength. Fate introduced himself as Mukuro. They couldn't believe he only equipped an ordinary sword, yet could fight so bravely. However, no one knew it possessed terrifying magic. The next morning, Mai appeared naked in front of Fate, shocking him. The girl wasn't embarrassed at all because he looked like a child to her. Afterward, Mai changed her outfit to go golem hunting. Unexpectedly, Fate had outdone her, making her furious. The protagonist had to share half of the reward money with her. Suddenly, Rudolph appeared, requesting Mukuro to become his subordinate. However, Mai disagreed because this big brother belonged to her. Rudolph mocked her for being a child, and Mai gently raised her sword, sending him flying. The protagonist quickly led the little sister to the horse carriage. Staying would cost them both their lives. Anger consumes many calories, so Mai needed to constantly replenish her energy. Fate noticed that despite eating a lot, she remained flat as a screen. His loose lips harmed him. The girl activated her wrath to the point of breaking the carriage wheel. While waiting for the uncle to repair it, Fate discovered Mai heading toward a nearby village. Greed observed that this place could easily be threatened by monsters, yet everything was suspiciously peaceful. Perhaps a highly skilled knight was protecting the village. In the distance stood Hausen Castle. He accidentally met the village chief, who was a holy knight. If the protagonist wanted to stay, he'd have to face him in a duel. The old man quickly discovered that he had the appraisal skill, only at level 1, yet his stats were over 2 million. The old man immediately drew his sword to fight. No matter how strong he was, Fate had to yield to the holy knight. He thought he'd be wandering outside tonight, but the village chief allowed him to stay on the condition that he would train him for a course. Perhaps Fate's body wasn't yet accustomed to the power, and his skills weren't being used to their fullest. Even though he could eliminate monsters, dealing with humans was more difficult. The man introduced himself as Oro Barbato. Upon seeing Mai, he assessed her as a highly skilled warrior. While Mai slept in warm blankets and soft mattresses, Fate had to diligently train. The village chief appraised him as quite weak in combat skills, which was common among new warriors rapidly gaining strength. Oro meticulously demonstrated each movement and the proper use of force. Without using power to move, one becomes much more agile. Thanks to Oro's teaching, Fate's semi-devourer's state improved significantly. After an exhausting day of training, it was time to rest and recover. Suddenly, the protagonist sensed the smell of monsters near the castle. Hearing Oro's call, he ran into the room to find Mai sleeping soundly beside a pile of food. Fortunately, the village chief understood and was sympathetic. He looked toward the castle with distant eyes full of thoughts. Fate saw Ayoung's family photo. His son looked very much like the protagonist. For some reason, he became the village chief here. Mai was angry because of her dirty face. The second day of training began. Today, Fate would learn practical fighting. He would use this tree branch to block Ayoung's sword. It seemed impossible, but Fate determined the trajectory and used force to push the blade. He had learned to control his stats. Mai rewarded him with a charcoal-smeared face to avenge yesterday's incident. Tomorrow he would set off early. Watching the little girl devour food made him feel very embarrassed. However, Mai had already lost her sense of taste and had something to do. To answer Fate's questions about that castle, Oro said it belonged to him 15 years ago. While on a mission, a monster born from hatred appeared and massacred the villagers. His son fought hard to protect the castle, but was unfortunately killed. Since then, Hausen had been dominated by demons, and his family remained imprisoned there. After hearing this, Fate couldn't contain the berserk within him. Oro immediately understood and wanted them both to go there to end everything. Little Mai volunteered to watch the house on the condition that she get 50 gold coins. Fate used magic to gently take down the gatekeeper. The two rushed straight into the castle. Unable to believe his eyes, Oro's wife and child were still living quite normally. The soul of greed realized they were all dead. This was an illusion created by the monsters. The son suddenly drew his sword to attack. Fate couldn't stand idle anymore. However, greed warned that if he acted, these souls would be devoured by his gluttony and suffer eternally. The protagonist had to let Oro fight them while he went to find the boss. Fate appraised the monster's location and used his skill to break through the wall. Finally seeing its face, this bringer of death had all stats above 1 million, forcing Fate to use magic to its maximum. The surrounding souls all moved toward him. However, he couldn't devour these innocent people. In this tense situation, Oro appeared just in time. He had cut all the tendons in their arms and legs so they couldn't move. Oro felt very guilty toward his wife and children for not returning sooner. Since things had turned out this way, he would be determined to free these souls. Oro rotated his holy sword, emanating a halo of light. Fate quickly advanced to combine their powers and end it all. The souls of his wife and son appeared. They didn't blame him at all. Instead, they encouraged him to continue his mission. Oro gave his son the belated gift he had promised. While the family was embracing, the skull still struggled to attack. Fortunately, fate detected it and intervened in time. All souls were released and ascended to heaven. Oro was quite surprised that he had broken through his level limit after the seamless coordination with fate. Next, they would eliminate the Scotten together. The next morning, when they returned to the village, they saw Mai was very angry. Oro quickly gave her the money as promised. She wasn't a greedy person. She needed a lot of money to rebuild her village. The village chief suddenly remembered Mai. 50 years ago, he had met her while eliminating monsters here. Indeed, Mai was a top-tier super warrior. Oro would need to train for another 1,000 years to approach her level. Mai finally revealed that she was a ghost who couldn't die. For Fate's eyes to return to normal, he had to eliminate monsters regularly. Oro wanted Fate to return here after finishing his personal business. He had something important to say. The Bervalik brothers had found the sage stone that could cure all diseases. Their joy didn't last long when they heard that Hart had been killed by Mikuro. Until now, Fate still couldn't accurately determine whether this little girl possessed wrath or gluttony. Mai kept eating continuously like a pig without rest. Suddenly, she gave him a piece of meat and then patted his head like an adorable puppy. Not stopping there, the little girl lay on his lap and enjoyed a refreshing nap. While Fate was savoring these peaceful moments, he couldn't help but recall the mysterious words Mai had mentioned the day before. He had asked Greed about the specific mission the little girl needed to accomplish, but Greed stubbornly remained silent, not revealing any additional information. Rossi's group had only just arrived at House in Town. She had heard that the castle there was being occupied by a monster. However, when they approached, they discovered the place had already been liberated. While they were still puzzled by the new situation, Mr. Oro stepped forward to welcome the group. She was quite surprised to learn that it was Mr. Oro who had named her Rossi. It was a great honor for her. Oro announced that the monster had been eliminated thanks to the help of a warrior, but he couldn't reveal the identity of that person because he had promised to keep it secret. Mr. Oro also confirmed that Rossi had been assigned a mission from the Bervalik household to go to Galia. However, she immediately asserted that this was her voluntary decision, as she wanted to inherit her father's wish to protect the lives of commoners. The sudden departure of his old friend Mason shocked Oro, but he saw hope in Rossi's determination. Therefore, he offered to train Rossi for a course before she departed for Galia. For Rossi, this was a wonderful opportunity she had never thought of, to be directly instructed by a superhero like Oro. She drew her father's holy sword and began training with eyes full of determination and the killing intent of a knight. Fate and Mai had arrived in Galia. This village had become a desolate ruin without life. Mai had been born in this land, but after moving to the capital, she had forgotten all memories. Everything had been destroyed except for the cocoon. The soul of Greed told him it was a chimera, a terribly flawed form of biological weapon that Galia had experimented with in ancient times. Inside the core were many types of monsters grafted together. Mai's task was to break it. It was time for Fate to repay the favor. The reason she needed Fate was because he had the berserk gluttony skill that could devour all the souls in the cocoon. Without beating around the bush anymore, Mai rushed forward, using her sword to break open the chimera. In its chest was a red-eyed person similar to Fate. Mai wanted Fate to finish off that core. However, the protagonist didn't want the girl's soul to suffer endlessly. Mai said it was just a monster disguised as a human. Continuing to be naive like that could lead to death without even realizing it. Suddenly, the chimera created a circle of magma to indirectly attack. Mai rushed in to slash the monster directly. Then Fate used the petrification arrow skill on it. The chimera wasn't easily eliminated. It possessed a self-healing skill, allowing it to fight continuously on its own. Mai's abilities became incredibly high. The heavier her weapon, the stronger her attack. However, this would make the wielder move less agilely. The chimera suddenly developed into a mature form. Hiding behind Mai like this, Fate wouldn't be qualified to support Rossi. This motivated the protagonist to release his semi-devourer state and eliminate the chimera himself. Despite the danger of being devoured by Berserk, Fate decided to counterattack. Exchanging 10% of his stats with Greed to use magic sand dust aimed at the enemy, Mai took advantage of this moment to unleash her destructive skill. The monster was completely overwhelmed. Seizing the opportunity before it self-healed, Fate used his scythe to break the barrier it created but failed. The soul of greed suggested targeting the flow of magic. He immediately used all his strength to thrust directly into its weakness and successfully broke the barrier. The chimera quickly flew away. Not submitting, Mai launched the protagonist high into the air. Taking advantage of this moment, Greed wanted to take another 20% of his stats. Fate could use his ultimate technique to kill the monster in mid-air. Unfortunately, he was caught in its barrier. He needed to quickly defeat it before burning up. Fate used all his strength to attack the magic center. At this moment, the mind-reading skill suddenly activated. Though he had eliminated a very powerful monster, he wasn't excited as usual. His heart felt wrenched because he had eaten his own kind. Mai and that girl had known each other before. However, once something becomes a chimera, it must be eliminated. Fate wanted to ask Mai a favor. When he gradually loses control and becomes a monster, Mai should kill him, because only she could do it. Suddenly, Mai lunged forward to hug the protagonist tightly and promised she would definitely do so. Fate would continue his journey to Babylon. Mai would stay here to rebuild the village. After the recent battle, Greed had transformed into its third form, a magic shield, and Fate's stats had decreased considerably. He tried to persuade Mai to come with him to recover a bit, but was flatly refused. Fate had arrived in Babylon, an area separated from Galia by walls made of alloy, thanks to which this city had been protected from monsters for thousands of years. The soul of Greed had been here before with its old master, but that person was no longer alive. Deadly sin weapons couldn't be destroyed. Only their owners died one after another. Surprisingly, Rossi had also arrived here. Fate suddenly had a premonition that she would face danger. Babylon was a gathering place for all warriors, including those harboring hatred toward knights. Mason was the lord responsible for maintaining order in this land. He felt very guilty that he couldn't help and had to witness Lord Mason's death. Rossi, being merciful by nature, didn't mind. She brought her father's wish here to join Mason in preventing monsters from Galia. Milia feared her master would be seduced by that guy, so she wanted to help. But Morgan pulled her back in time because confronting a holy knight would only result in death. Rossi decided to go on an inspection. Meanwhile, Fate was struggling with the issue of making a living. The standard of living here was truly very high. His meager money could fly away in an instant. Greed wanted the protagonist to buy him a new armor. Looking around already made his eyes red, when suddenly the shop owner appeared, appraising the burnt cloak. From his words, he seemed very knowledgeable about magic, worth trusting. Plus, with Greed's urgency, Fate decided to buy a new sword sheath. Throughout his career, the man had never seen this blade before. Being this noble required equally prestigious packaging. The shop owner quoted 500 gold coins, nearly causing Fate to faint on the spot. Fate ran away as fast as he could. Putting that aside, now he needed to focus on eliminating monsters to earn a living. A group of warriors came by, wanting him to join their team. But the protagonist was so strong, he didn't need to team up with anyone. Seeing his tattered clothes, they didn't realize he had the strength of a knight. Being despised as poor and lowly, Fate was determined to earn a lot of money and buy a cool outfit. Arriving at the border area, there was a truly disgusting smell coming from monster corpses. Even more horrifying was the smell of spores. They were mildly toxic, so inhaling too many could cause moss to grow in the lungs. Just arriving, he had to face Orachi monsters. They traveled in herds of about 50 and were very intelligent in coordinating attacks. Fate was about to deal with them but was beaten to it. Greed incited the protagonist to rush in and steal, but his conscience wouldn't allow it. Unexpectedly, another herd of Orachi appeared, creating a pincer movement, so it wasn't about stealing anymore. Fate immediately rushed in at dizzying speed. Greed transformed into a shield as solid as a fortress, blocking both physical attacks and magic. With it, the protagonist easily defeated the Orachi. Strangely, despite killing the whole herd, the reaction of his gluttony was very weak. Fate quickly collected the monster ears to sell for money. Everyone was shocked by such a large bag. The guy from earlier thought Fate had stolen his kill of Orachi and taken the ears. Fate calmly taught them a well-deserved lesson. The reward money he received was 100 gold coins. At this moment, Rossi suddenly appeared, making the protagonist fear his identity would be exposed. However, she came to resolve this commotion clearly. Rossi apologized to him for making Babylon so disorderly. Once having to bow his head before her, now he could look up and talk. Milia mischievously wanted to remove his mask, but Morgan continued to be the one who prevented it. For warriors, masks were also important equipment. When asked his name by Rossi, the protagonist answered Mukuro. Conveniently, she also gently mentioned his way of dressing, making Fate extremely embarrassed. They couldn't believe that someone so poor and shabby could defeat these people. Fate met the shop owner from earlier. He introduced himself as Jay and had heard about the protagonist single-handedly eliminating 27 Orachi. Jay wanted him to become a brand representative, wearing new outfits to promote the store. Such a good deal. How could he refuse? The two agreed to cooperate. Wearing the new armor, Fate looked incredibly cool. He thought it was free, but unexpectedly, Jay demanded 80 gold coins. The protagonist bargained it down to half, which was somewhat acceptable. Next, he visited a crowded bar. Surely the drinks must be very good. Indeed, they were excellent, but not the wine, rather, the perfect 3 curves and that sharp-featured face. How could one not be captivated? Fate felt drawn and couldn't resist. Even more surprising was that she knew his name. This was Eris Lust, a fellow species with Fate, possessing one of the deadly sin skills. Eris invited the protagonist to her home to sip some wine. Fate was completely captivated. This was the effect of lust. Regardless of age or gender, once caught, one falls in love immediately. The pair of fruits hitting his eyes made Fate entranced. Eris had been following Fate since he was in the old capital. When the gluttony skill was activated, she had wanted to approach him but postponed it because they would meet sooner or later anyway. Eris knew everything that had happened. About she wasn't clear because that girl was of the 2nd generation, while Eris was of the 1st. The fruits were what made very envious of Eris. Many chimeras still existed here. Currently, the Holy Knight class had weakened, making it very difficult to eliminate them thoroughly. Eris was the protector of this kingdom and placed national interests above all else. To help the country prosper for the next 500 to 1,000 years, she was targeting Rossi for assassination. Fate became angry and would never accept that happening. Eris calmly explained the reason. Monsters that were eliminated would accumulate hatred over time, and monsters born from that would emerge. Holy Knights were a similar case. Oppressed souls would accumulate hatred and crystallize. Rossi was the most beloved by commoners. If she died, a massive amount of hatred would be generated. At that point, humans with supreme skills would be born to protect the country, a scenario that seemed quite perfect but didn't sit well with Fate at all. What was so great about letting Rossi die? Things would only get worse. Despite Fate's objections, Eris remained determined to carry out her plan. At all costs, the protagonist had to protect Rossi's life. At this moment, intelligence information was delivered. The material collection team in Galia had mysteriously disappeared, so Rossi had ordered all personnel to gather for a rescue mission. Simultaneously, the sword blacksmith for Fate had informed him about lacking an important ingredient for making the sword sheath, magic glass. Coincidentally, that only appeared in the Great Valley of Galia, the same location that Rossi's rescue team was heading to. On the way, our protagonist encountered countless orcs blocking the path, but none of these were worthy opponents for him. He quickly used the shield state to block numerous magic attacks, then charged forward to attack and used the gluttony skill to swiftly dispose of them. That night, while Fate was resting, he suddenly fell into a dream state. The white-haired girl appeared mysteriously again. Based on his conjecture, it seemed she wanted to say something, but he couldn't hear it. Then he went to a red sea with countless corpses of monsters he had eliminated. Unexpectedly, the people Fate had killed also appeared and dragged him into the pool of blood. But he couldn't do anything except scream helplessly. Due to extreme fear, the protagonist abruptly woke up. At this moment, 4 salamanders appeared. These evolved monsters would be more difficult to deal with than orcs. Greed suggested the protagonist use the bow form to petrify them. But after one of them was hit by the move, they neither ran away nor charged forward for revenge, but continued straight ahead as if controlled by something. On the rescue team's side, things weren't peaceful either. Salamanders were attacking them in an unprepared state. The foolish Milia rushed forward using fire sword magic to deal with monsters that specialized in fire, resulting in her being knocked unconscious. Right at the critical moment, the protagonist leaped out hero rescuing Beauty, and in just a few basic moves eliminated the fire lizards, leaving everyone in admiration. The group then discovered markings on the monsters' corpses. It seemed they had been controlled by someone targeting Rossi. Afterward, they reached the Great Valley, but due to different missions, they had to separate from here. Fate continued his journey to find magic glass. Upon reaching a large forest, countless petrified monster graves appeared before him. Suddenly, he saw Eris staring intently at something. He quickly pursued but lost track. However, what was behind him was even more terrifying, a chimera standing tall in the mountain. Fortunately, it had lost its core so it couldn't move. Probably the mountain collapse had exposed traces from the ancient battle. But it seemed he had rejoiced too soon, as 3 had awakened earlier. Fate suspected Eris had done this. While deeply pondering, a huge explosion occurred behind him. The 3 awakened chimeras were attacking Rossi's team. However, these were entirely different from ordinary monsters, so even with the team's combined efforts, they couldn't harm them. What's worse, Morgan and Nazin were injured by them. In this dangerous moment, Fate appeared to rescue everyone. His techniques did cause damage, but the monsters had self-healing abilities, though the recovery speed was quite slow. After informing Rossi about the monster's weaknesses, they both charged forward together to successfully eliminate one. Milia was screaming, struggling against another monster's attack. Fate quickly ran to assist her. Greed transformed from sword to scythe. The two coordinated perfectly as before to handle the next beast. Victory seemed just within reach. But the final monster used a powerful earthquake technique that cracked the ground, causing both to fall straight into a deep abyss. While Fate had tried to save the woman of his dreams, he had used his body as a shield to reduce the impact of the fall. Luckily, neither was seriously injured. Fate heard from Rossi that the rescue team had arrived too late. The excavation team had been completely eliminated. While they were chatting and flirting with each other, the anger of Gluttony suddenly flared up. To avoid hurting her, Fate quickly left the scene. Hearing the loud noise, Rossi also hurriedly ran over. The previous battle had collapsed the cellar, creating countless fragments of magic glass. These fragments were from monsters that had been eliminated and evolved, so finding them among the broken pieces was nearly impossible. Finally, they returned to the surface. The entire team was delighted to see Rossi safe. Scene change, a young man wearing a white bone mask appeared with one eye colored blue like Fate's eye. It seemed a terrible battle was about to unfold, signaling significant challenges ahead. Upon returning without understanding what was happening, Rossi pointed her sword at the protagonist. Because he had caused numerous fights and property damage, as a holy knight, she was obliged to arrest him according to the law. But the protagonist didn't want to harm her, so he didn't draw his sword and fought her as is. But it seemed he had underestimated this holy knight. Her powerful techniques continuously pushed Fate backward. Not stopping there, she used body enhancement to attack with extreme speed, cracking one side of his mask. Fearing his identity would be exposed, the protagonist decided to reveal his true strength. He used the sword light technique that only holy knights could perform. Rossi was surprised that he wasn't a holy knight yet could master this technique, partly thanks to the sword sheath made from magic glass, which helped support holy knight techniques. Without further ado, the technique came down powerfully, immediately changing the situation. Now Rossi was the one backed into a corner. Suddenly, the necklace he had given her appeared on her neck, making him pause momentarily. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Rossi lunged forward and knocked Greed into the air, equivalent to a clear victory. She wondered why he had shown mercy to her, but the protagonist said nothing and turned to leave. Morgan later sought him out to inform him about understanding the structure of the chimera's core and boasted that his entire family had been researching lost ancient techniques. He proudly claimed his daughter was much more accomplished than himself. But when the protagonist wanted to meet her for further research, he was misunderstood as wanting to court his daughter. So this daughter-obsessed man chased and beat him. While Fate was lying in contemplation, an alarm sounded, signaling that monsters were chaotically attacking the city. The dead match attack had begun. Rossi quickly gathered all soldiers to prepare for the monster onslaught. Although dead match was within Rossi's defensive capabilities, Fate stood nearby just in case something unexpected happened. Before he could think much further, Greed announced that in another direction, a monster had appeared. It was like a giant whale swimming underground at extreme speed, intending to crash directly into Rossi's Holy Knight formation. Since Rossi's team was focused only on resisting dead match, the risk of the entire team being eliminated was very high. Fate decided to switch to bow and arrow form, then used the power of Semi-Devourer to double his power and range. A powerful shot from the bow severely wounded the monster, causing it to surface. It turned out to be a giant slime. This slime created an acid rain, forcing Fate into a defensive position. To maintain a safe distance from the acid rain, he continued using the bow to fight. It seemed the slime didn't want to fight, but continued burrowing underground straight toward Rossi. This slime appeared to be controlled and focused solely on a single target. But the monster didn't anticipate that Fate had predicted its moves and had arrived one step ahead. Fate used 20% of his Semi-Devourer power and shot at the enemy. Despite being hit in the core, the slime was still alive. Suddenly, above Fate appeared someone wearing a white bone mask. Fate suspected this was Eris, and he had interfered with this monster. Fate immediately attacked, but his techniques couldn't reach him. Because this person had reached the demigod realm, techniques from those in lower realms couldn't affect him. Unable to accept that he couldn't touch his enemy, Fate continued charging forward with his sword despite the enormous difference in strength. Even in Semi-Devourer state, he still couldn't touch even a leg hair of his opponent. This helplessness made Fate feel extremely tense and desperate. In this critical moment, sensing the increasingly serious situation, Fate decided to release the full power of Gluttony. With intense concentration, he reached Realm E. His power immediately increased tremendously, allowing Fate to easily push back the enemy. The mask was also broken, But Fate realized the person behind it wasn't Eris as he had suspected. It was Nazen. Before understanding the situation clearly, Nazen blew a whistle to summon something from a distance. From the west, a giant celestial dragon was flying toward them at an astonishing speed, aiming directly at Rossi and her team. Recognizing this serious threat, Fate immediately rushed in to save Rossi, but was blocked by the slimes and Nazen. The slimes continuously attacked, preventing Fate from approaching the celestial dragon. Meanwhile, Rossi and her Holy Knight team were fighting fiercely to hold the line. The sudden appearance of the celestial dragon forced the Holy Knight team to quickly retreat to preserve their forces. To hold back the enemy and protect her team, Rossi decided to stay and fight. Just when it seemed she was about to meet her deceased father in a miracle, the situation suddenly changed. Despite being held back by the slimes in a fierce battle, Fate timely appeared at the crucial moment. The protagonist rushed in to shield Rossi from a fatal blow from the celestial dragon. The impact of the technique was so powerful it shattered Fate's mask. Unable to hide anymore, with no other choice, he had to acknowledge his true identity to Rossi. However, the protagonist's blood-red eyes made her somewhat fearful. Seeing this, Fate reminded Rossi to return to the city, then quickly ran away despite her crying tears. The battle with the celestial dragon continued. The protagonist used the dark prison technique to lock the monster's movements and faced Nazen one-on-one. But because he was still using power to restrain the celestial dragon while forcing his body to advance to Realm A, his strength was gradually decreasing. The other, knowing this, continuously mocked him. In a moment of carelessness, one of Fate's arms was taken by him. Nazen hastily rejoiced, thinking the reward was firmly in his grasp. Just when it seemed the film would end early, Fate unexpectedly appeared from behind, piercing the enemy's heart with his sword. It turned out the protagonist had used an illusion to deceive his vision. Combined with his excessive confidence, it led to his miserable death. Just as he claimed victory, he fell into a dream state again. The white-haired girl named Luna, who frequently appeared, was the core of Hanan. Luna had been inside the protagonist to prevent Gluttony from activating. However, her power was limited and could no longer resist. What happened next would depend on Fate's own decision. Life or death would depend on his abilities. Before leaving, she warned that if he consumed the celestial dragon, Fate would be completely controlled by Gluttony. As the protagonist was about to fall into the pit, greed appeared to stop him. However, he had decided to eliminate this danger before departing peacefully. Returning to reality, the celestial dragon had escaped from the seal. Its current stats were already above level E. Fate wasn't afraid of this. He was determined to eliminate it to the end. With only one arm, the protagonist threw his sword, causing massive damage to the celestial dragon, then followed with a punch like an exploding firecracker to the monster's head. Not stopping there, Fate cut off its two wings, causing it to fall to the ground. The celestial dragon wouldn't let this slide. It launched an extremely powerful technique toward the two people. Fate quickly activated the double enhancement skill, splitting the celestial dragon's technique in two, then performed the finishing move, cutting its body in half. Although both had claimed victory, this had triggered Gluttony again. Worried that if he lost control, he would become a greater threat than the celestial dragon. Therefore, the protagonist transferred all his stats to unlock a new form for greed. At this moment, Mai also appeared to fulfill the promise between them. But as Mai was about to finish him, Rossi appeared and saved him by a hair's breadth. Fate also discovered that whenever Rossi was present, Gluttony would calm down. He was no longer losing control. Despite being deceived, she never blamed Fate. She cried insistently that no matter what power he had, Fate was still Fate, a gentle person who always brought great motivation to her. Just as she finished speaking, he also fainted. When he woke up, he knew he was in the inn. After the battle with Nazen, the protagonist had lost his left arm. At this moment, Mai and Eris entered the room. They said Fate had been sleeping for a week. Mai told him about Nazen. It turned out he had been controlled by the dark sword gun in Vin, forced to be its host and fight. However, since deadly sin weapons couldn't be destroyed, Mai had thrown it far away toward Galia. Eris also came to borrow the protagonist's strength. Because the celestial dragon was now dead, the world would turn to a new page. Currently, he was one of those possessing deadly sin power, so this duty couldn't be refused. But first, his lost arm would be restored, and Fate would have to leave before Rossi returned. If not, just hearing her name would make the gluttony inside him excited. When Rossi came to visit, he had already left some time ago, leaving only a farewell letter on the table. In it, he wrote that he wanted to apologize for hiding his gluttony skill from her and promised they would meet again when he had become stronger. Scene changed to a castle. Everyone was very surprised about Mukuro's true identity. Before finishing the sentence, Rafen entered the research room again. Upon entering, his tone suddenly changed. He unexpectedly laughed with delight about Fate helping him eliminate Heart. The stone inside the box also began to emit purple light, as if signaling an even more intense battle about to unfold.